What's up, Lancers? Happy Thursday. I'm here to talk to you today. We're continuing on with Unit 5. Yesterday we started talking about political parties and linkage institutions that link citizens to the government, to our policymakers, our Congress members, our president, the legislative branch, executive branch, judicial branches, right? So we're talking about political parties, and we talked about the functions of political parties, that they mobilize and educate voters, right? That they help run candidates for office. They recruit candidates for office, and they run those candidates in elections. And they narrow down a very complex area, a very complex situation in elections, and basically narrowed down to two candidates, one Republican and one Democrat. So, outside of that, they're educating voters, they're mobilizing voters, they're running people for office, they're running these elections, these campaigns, and fundraising for campaigns and all those things, right? So today we're talking about how and why political parties change and adapt. Right, so we know that there's two main political parties. We know that there's the Democrats and the Republicans, and what you know today as a Democrat and what you know today as a Republican was not always necessarily the case, and really it really changed in the 1930s. Kind of started in the 1930s with the New Deal, and then continued in the 1960s with the Civil Rights Movement. Right, so we're going to talk about how those parties have changed and how they have adapted, and the ways in which the candidates are chosen for the party, how that's kind of been removed from the political party, and the process has been now given to the people, right, with these primary elections, and giving the people the choice to choose their candidates instead of the party, right? So what you need to be able to do is to explain why and how political parties change and adapt. Right, so the first thing of essential knowledge, it says that parties have adapted to candidate-centered campaigns, and their role in nominating candidates has been weakened. Right, so what used to be, if we think about like the 1800s, maybe even the early 1900s, the party was very essential in choosing their candidates. Right, they would often have these party conventions every 4 years, right, where the bigwigs, the VIPs, the party officials would go, the delegates would go to choose their candidate, right? There wasn't really a series of national primaries, of national elections to choose our candidates, and that has been replaced. So when they would go to these conventions, they would basically go in these smoke-filled rooms, in these dark rooms, secret locations. They would go and choose the candidate for their party. Right, it was left to a select few. We talked about the elite theory. Right, these elite groups, these elite people would go and choose their candidates for their party. And campaigning was much different, right? They didn't have automobiles, they didn't have transportation to get to all the states. It was word of mouth, and people went and voted, right? It's becoming much more publicized. It's really like I would say like a popularity contest, right? Where the candidate-centered campaigns. These candidates are centered on the candidates themselves. We talked about big personalities, and the 2016 election, right? The 2020 election, with Joe Biden sweeping the 3 states yesterday. It looks like it's going to be former President Joe Biden, right, and Donald Trump, right? When we talked about the 2016 election, how it was Trump and Hillary Clinton, two big personalities. So the parties are now much more focused on these candidate-centered campaigns, right? Focusing on the candidates and not so much the party issues, right? Not so much what the party wants, but more so what the candidate wants and what the candidate wants to get out there. And now we have these primary elections, which basically the people are going to the polls to choose their candidates, right? We know that if you get so many delegates through these state primaries, that candidate's going to win the nomination. And we know who the candidate's going to be. We'll probably know like June, July, who that candidate's going to be. And then that'll take us into the party conventions in like August, right around August, and then the campaigning and everything for the November election, right? So that has kind of removed some power from the political parties, and it's put it more on the candidates, more on the campaigns, and taken away from the political parties. Parties modify their policies and messaging to appeal to various demographic coalitions. right? Their parties are constantly trying to reach these voters, right? These blocks of voters, and we do know that there's conservatives and liberals, and those people do generally tend to support the liberals supporting the Democratic Party and the conservatives supporting the Republican Party. But we do have these big blocks of voters, right? A lot of the blocks tend to be the moderates. Women are a big group. The younger people tend to be a group. If we look at the election with John McCain, when John McCain was running for president in 2008 against Barack Obama, he chose Sarah Palin, the governor from Alaska, as his running mate. Why did he do that? Because as a Republican, he knew how crucial the women's vote would be, right? It didn't work out for him, but that was his strategy, and that's what he thought. So they're constantly trying to attract these coalitions, these groups of people to their party. The structure of parties has also been influenced by critical elections and regional realignments, right? Critical elections. So we think about these critical elections. We think about the changes in these blocks of voters that tend to support the parties, right? The best example I can give to you is the 1960, 1964, 1968 elections, right? And basically what was happening is, the national government, the federal government, was going into these southern states, which had been very much state rightist, right? They were all about state rights, and telling them they were passing legislation, passing the 24th Amendment, passing the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Voting Rights Act of 1965, and saying you can't discriminate anymore, right? And southern states said, yes, we can. This is how it's been, right? There was this tradition of the way that the South was, these southern traditions, and the South was very reluctant to change, right? So what ends up happening, if you think about, the old political parties, you think of the Northern Republicans, right? The party of Abraham Lincoln and the anti-slavery movement, and the South, right? The South, which was very much pro-slavery and all about states' rights, and it was Southern Democrats, Southern white Democrats, right? So what ends up happening is you have these critical elections and these regional realignments. The South, which used to be Southern Democrats, right, in this issue of civil rights and civil liberties, becomes a hot topic, right? And so what basically the Republicans end up doing is saying, hey, we're gonna support state rights, right? We've always supported state rights. It's all been about the states, the state rights, and we're gonna come through and we're gonna support those issues that are important to the South. And at doing so, they pick up huge blocks of white voters in the South that ended up joining with the Republican Party. And the North, right, the Northern, what used to be Republicans then became very Democratic during that time, really right around the 1930s, Industrial Revolution, right, this new movement of industry, of factories, of labor unions. Labor unions were huge, right? So you had this shift in these coalitions, these Republicans and these Democrats. And now what we know is the South is very Republican, the North is very Democrat. But it was all those issues. It was the issues of industrialization, of these new factories, these new jobs, this movement to the cities, the Southern rights, right? All of these issues which created these critical elections, right? And these shift in blocks of voters and the regional realignments between the North and the South. The structure of parties has also been influenced by campaign finance laws, right? We know the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, which basically limits how much an individual, how much you and I and our neighbors, every citizen can donate to elections, right? And how has that changed how parties fundraise, right? They used to have big, deep pocket donors who would fund millions and millions of dollars to these parties. Well, they can't do that anymore. They can't give it to the candidates, right? They can still form these PACs, these political action committees, to donate to the parties and the candidates, but even those are restricted to $5,000 and $10,000. So these new campaign finance laws have made it much harder for parties to fundraise. Instead of focusing on maybe just a few deep pockets, now they have to focus on the whole party and drawing funds and aid from the whole party members to donate and help run their campaigns and elections, right? and changes in communication and data management technology, right? We know that now reaching out to people is a lot easier, right? I can reach out all to you on this morning, on this Thursday morning, and get my message out to you. And it's kind of the same way for candidates, right? They use technology, they use Twitter, they use social media. They're constantly in contact with the media and spreading their message and getting their message out. So it's much easier these days for candidates and parties to get their message out to the people, the voters, their party members, right? And they can use technology and social media to reach much more people than they used to be able to. And then parties use communication technology and voter data management to disseminate, control, and clarify political messages and enhance outreach and mobilization of voters. Right? It's all about getting that message out to the voters. Who is the candidate going to be? What are the issues? Like, what is the platform, right? Getting that platform. The platform, which is, 80, 90, 100 pages, not everyone's going to pick that up and read it, right? The average voter's not going to pick that up and read it. So communicating those issues and communicating those ideas to the voters, right? Reaching out to the moderate voters, getting out to the female voters, the moderate voters, the young voters, things like that, we're going to support your issues. Older voters too, right? Even that, reaching out to all different types of undecided voters and how they can get that message out to those people in order to help promote their party and also their candidate, right? So we've been talking about how political parties change, right? Critical elections and the use of technology and the use of primaries that have weakened the party system and basically taken away the choice of choosing a nominee, choosing a candidate, taking that away from the parties and giving it more to the people. So focusing more on the candidates instead of the party, right? Those are shifts that have occurred over the last 40, 50 years because of technology, because of the ability to reach out to people, the ability to get to people, the ability to mobilize voters, bring voters together, and bring everybody under this idea, this big tent of the political party. So hopefully that makes sense. I will be posting our notes here shortly. I'm working on getting those out to you guys. And if you have any questions, make sure you reach out to me. If you need anything, please send me a message on Google Classroom or Remind. Take care, y'all. Thanks. Bye.